What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 62. We will call it the Rule 5 Draft Roundup. My name is Jamie Cameron, recording as always with Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, what's going on, man? How are you doing, sir?
Good, I'm good. No, things are good. How are you doing in your
I'm not doing
hotel suite that you're in?
I'm not doing good because as you know, Jeremy, I travel for work on a semi-regular basis around monthly, and it's fine. I don't especially like it, but I like the work that I do. And I'm in Pennsylvania, and it just so happens that on this trip to Pennsylvania, I am on a hotel floor with a bunch of traveling sports teams who are all teenagers. And I almost gave us our first E for explicit episode rating
Wow.
because it was brutal, dude. I'm
What?
not fussy. Like the volume, it's too loud. The walls are thin. You're probably hearing me complain about them right now. They are up till all hours of the night making noise. I was
What?
about to call the lobby last night, and looks like we're settling in for more of the same tonight, buddy.
What
So
sport? What sport?
I don't actually know.
Because I feel like this is important, right? Because there are some sports where your kids are going to be rowdy regardless, right?
Mhm.
But I feel like there are some sports specifically where your parents are going to be rowdy too.
Basketball is my speculation, but
Okay.
that's
Basketball parents are usually pretty chill.
but that's only based on like what season are we in? You know what I mean? Like I'm not like critically analyzing this as there also seems to be boys and girls teams from
Okay.
the same school. So I don't know, man.
See, my worry for you is that it's hockey because hockey's rowdy.
Sure, that's my worry for me too. Anyway, suffice it to say, Jeremy, I am very tired, and so um, if I'm
and
more grump,
and on Eastern time.
if I and on Eastern time, so therefore, if I'm more grumpy and irritable than normal, if that's possible, that's why. Um, but yeah, dude, in keeping with what we talked about last week, this offseason has continued to be interesting. And for the first time this offseason, we actually have interesting Minnesota Twins news that we'll talk about. And I didn't even add it to our running order because it's fairly recent, but I am excited to dig in there with you. We'll follow our usual flow. And so the main topic of this episode is going to be Rule 5 selections. For the sake of time, we are going to keep it to the Major League selections because each of the organizations that we cover the most made a Rule 5 selection, which I think is interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about those guys. We'll do some MLB offseason big moves stuff because, again, the teams that we follow have continued to be interesting, especially, Jeremy, the Chicago Cubs, who, in between last episode and this, acquired Kyle Tucker in a trade with Houston Astros for Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and Cam Smith. Big trade. We talked a lot earlier this offseason about how the Cubs are lacking star power. Not anymore. Kyle Tucker, one of the best outfielders in baseball, only have him for a season. What are your initial thoughts and reactions to the trade?
I think, like, just face value, it's a good deal for the Cubs for the 2025 season.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be better now than they would have been if they didn't make the deal.
For
The
sure.
problem that I have with it is this the window that the Cubs have to compete? Because the Dodgers are still dodgering. And so you get Kyle Tucker for 1 year. I think, if you're a Cubs fan, you're just assuming, well, Kyle Tucker will resign. Kyle Tucker is going to get a boatload of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so if this is going for it, I'm just not sure this was the right time to do it. But if I'm a Cubs fan, I'm like, hey, great, Kyle Tucker, great player. This is going to be fun. Cam Smith is the name that is going to come back and haunt the Cubs
Maybe.
potentially,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think the Astros will develop him, and it's going to be like one of those. And I'm not making this comparison. I want to preface this by saying that, but like the Jordan Alvarez deal, right? Where all of a sudden Alvarez is the top
Hmm.
10 player in baseball, and you're like, and you got him in a trade for what? Um, and so it'll be
Yep.
like, man, they got Cam Smith for 1 year of Kyle Tucker, who then signed with the Dodgers anyway. Like, and that's where it's hard. But I do like that they're going for it. And then they kind of not necessarily double down, but make more moves today. So I do like the deal for the Cubs, but I don't dislike the deal for the Astros.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get on to the move to the follow-up move today, which I think is fair to say is almost kind of a completion of that Kyle Tucker trade. But I do want to grab some more, like ask you a little bit more about Cam Smith. Um, he was one of our favorite bats, or one of our favorite college bats ahead of the 2024 draft, right? In what was a solid, like rich and deep class of college bats, and I think we both agreed several times that we hoped he might fall to the Twins. He went on an absolute heater when he made his pro debut. Um, Made it all the way up to Double A in 115 at bats, hit 7 home runs, hit 313, 396 on base percentage, good for an OPS over 1,000. So here is my specific Cam Smith question for you. Do you like that the Cubs capitalized on a hot start? Because that feels like a calculated risk that you're taking, right? He undoubtedly increased his value as a prospect between his pro debut and the end of the 2024 season. And as you say, that could come back to bite them because if he continues that trajectory, he could be a superstar. At the same time, if he comes back down to earth and has a poor year with the Astros, although I'd probably bet against it because they're good at player development, then suddenly that trade's looking a little rosier and easier for the Cubs farm system to handle. So what's your thought on being aggressive and trading a guy who's made a hot start to his pro career?
I don't know necessarily that it matters a ton as
Mm-hmm.
far as like his prospect status didn't necessarily change. Um, I think what the Astros
I don't
thought.
agree with that though. I disagree. I think like and like it's tough. Sorry to cut across you, Jeremy, but we're like in the middle of folks like publishing their top 100s, right? Or their updated top 100s in some industry places have and some haven't. But I think by the time we get to like March, Cam Smith will be on a good number of top 100s, and he would not have been coming out of the draft.
Okay, I mean, and that's fair. I think he would have been. Yeah, and you're probably right. I don't. Does that change? I mean, maybe it does because it was Cam Smith or Matt Shaw, and that's probably not a super fair comparison to make
Yeah,
at draft time. I think we'd all rather have Matt Shaw.
for sure.
Um, so yeah, and the funny thing is, and like you said, we'll talk about today's deal, but I also heard or read or saw that part of not wanting to get rid of Owen Casey or Matt Shaw was because there might be some talks to acquire another pitcher.
Hmm.
So it maybe was just the first domino of a handful of dominoes, which is kind of cool because Kyle Tucker's a relatively extremely large domino, right? I
Yeah,
mean, so
it's a
yeah,
big one.
I mean, I do. Cam Smith is going to be great for the Astros. I'm confident of that. So, but Kyle Tucker, the 1 year thing, you offer arbitration or you offer the qualifying offer, so you're at least getting a pick, right?
Yep.
But it's going to be really hard to sign him.
Gonna be tough. Gonna be tough. Gonna have to make me a Godfather offer if they want that. So let's get to the next move because, like you say, they made another move today in what feels like the middle of their series of moves. Today they traded Cody Bellinger and $5 million to the New York Yankees for Cody Petit, who's just a filler, nothing
Right.
pitcher. Kind of completes the Tucker trade and gives the Cubs the financial flexibility to add more. In my brief reading up, I saw figures quoted between 40 and 50 million potentially to play with before they get to exceeding the luxury tax threshold they want to be at. Jeremy, what's your read on the Bellinger trade? Seems like pretty much as close to a straight salary dump as you can get.
Yeah, which is interesting. But if the Yankees are going to play him in center field, um,
That's
it's
interesting.
hard to always understand or find like the right value of guys when they're
Hmm.
tied to a giant price tag, right? Um, like Carlos Correa as a player, you want him on your team. Carlos Correa for the next X amount of years at X amount of total dollars becomes a negative contract potentially. Like how you view these guys, and then it's like, but what are they gonna do with our finances? Um, and so Bellinger, I know that there's some opt outs, there's some money. He was very good, but he's also been very not good. And so uh, I do think he'll either be I think it's going to be like the extremes that we've seen with him already. He's either going to be great for the
Hmm.
Yankees or he's going to be an absolute train wreck that they like buy out and send away because he just can't get it done. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what happened with Joey Gallo in New York, right?
Yep.
That's
And
sort of
so, as you alluded to, sounds like the Cubs' next big move is going to be targeting a starting pitcher, and it sounds like they are going after a bigger fish. I'm curious to hear your list of names here, Jeremy. The ones I've heard most frequently connected to the Cubs are Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins recently. That would be interesting. Also heard Seattle starters today, specifically George Kirby. I'm sure there are others. That would be an extremely expensive trade for Kirby. Um, any other names you've heard? And do you think this makes sense as the next big move for them to get another high quality, like playoff caliber starter to bolster the top of that rotation?
um, I think it makes sense based on what it seems like they're doing.
Hmm.
They're going for it this year. So if that's your MO, then yes. Do I think that really makes sense? I don't. But at the same time, if you're strong enough to get in the playoffs, we've seen really good teams lose in the playoffs, and so if the Cubs can get there in the Central, which the Brewers may be down, um,
We also said that last year.
right? The Reds, the Pirates, like it'll be competitive. But if they can get there,
Yeah.
all bets are off. I I I do like Luzardo. I've said that behind this camera a number of times.
Hmm.
Uh, I hadn't heard specifically who the Mariners were looking to deal, but I had heard that they may be looking to deal a pitcher, and the Cubs have the capital to go get it, right? Uh,
100%.
so why not? I think that's a logical thing to do, and if you're a fan of the Cubs and you're making these moves, yeah, you live with the fact that you're going to have to deal some prospects. But then where's that line that you draw, right?
Yeah.
Are they gonna give up Owen Casey and Kate Horton?
I think if so, I'm glad you brought up the price because it brings me to a like an inefficiency that teams seem unwilling to kind of sell on, right? And I'm thinking about two orgs specifically that we don't really talk about much, and it's the Seattle Mariners and the Baltimore Orioles. And I clustered them in slightly the same way, pending what they do this offseason. The Orioles last season traded for Corbin Burns. He's now gone, and they have made very little effort to bolster their starting rotation. There was an article published at Pitcher List that their GM Elias is unwilling to spend significant resources on payroll, even though he's been green lighted for doing so. Signed a Japanese starter a couple of days ago, but their rotation is just not a competitive playoff rotation. And so far, they've seemed unwilling to kind of compromise the depth of their minor league system to the point where it's going to get to a point where that minor league system is not as valuable as it was. And then Seattle, on the other hand, have so many great starting pitchers I just feel like they have to trade one. Like their offense last season was so bad. They have Castillo, Kirby, Brian Wu, Logan Gilbert. I mean, you just have dude after dude. And if they traded someone like Kirby, I think you are looking at a major league starter, 2 to 3 top 100 prospects to get
Oof.
that deal done. But just based on the prices that we've seen so far this offseason, based on how good George Kirby is, and so I don't know that the Cubs would be willing to pay that, but I'm curious, as kind of a side tangent here, whether you feel like Seattle should be aggressive with marketing and trading one of their starters.
Well, I mean, whenever you can deal from depth, you got to consider it,
Mhm.
right? I mean, look at the history of the Twins trading AJ Przinsky, right? Um, Not that it worked out well for them, but the Twins trading Wilson Ramos,
Mhm.
the Brewers dealing closers because they realize that there's an advantage to getting something in return instead of holding on to them. And I think like whenever you can do that, you you got to at least consider it. Understanding it might not work out.
Yep.
And so if the Mariners can not deplete what they have, but can strengthen something else by not really significantly weakening their rotation, well, why wouldn't you? Um, but the Mariners made that trade with the Twins last year, and it didn't really work out for either
No,
team.
sure didn't.
Uh, but if you can add top 100 prospects, and I think I heard correctly that um, the Cubs prior to trading Cam Smith had 8 top 100 prospects, so they could do the same thing, right? They have depth at that area.
Mhm.
Who has depth in the area that we need, um, and make a deal that benefits both parties, like they did last year when they made a deal with the Dodgers. And so, um, yeah, it'll be interesting because the trade market, like you're talking about the Orioles and Corbin Burns, 30 teams, and not necessarily that everybody's in the market to sign guys, but you can like if you're in the market to sign a starting pitcher, like that pitcher can drive up the market by getting offers from other teams.
Mhm.
And then if you miss that guy, you turn to somebody else. But I feel like in the trade market, it's a lot more specific. And so you see these returns, you're like, man, couldn't they have done better? Um, but if the market just wasn't matching up between two teams, it wasn't happening. And so I think the Orioles could do that too. They still have a good minor league system, and so even if they're not willing to spend money and they're not doing it like if they're competitive and they can get an arm in July, once you can get there
Yeah.
and then supplement it, that's another option too. So,
Yep.
uh, the simple fact is it's December 17th and things have actually happened in the baseball market.
I know. So exciting. One more thing, which I also didn't have in our running order, but we need to touch on quickly. The Brewers have also made a significant trade since we last spoke, trading Devin Williams to the Yankees. The return there, Caleb Durbin, a high quality, like a high quality bat to ball skills type infielder, and Nestor Cortez. So another big NL Central trade there. Seemed inevitable that Williams was going to get traded. Any strong opinions, Jeremy, about the Brewers' return? Um, how much you like Cortez or not? And just your thoughts on that trade in general.
I actually, when I saw it, I was like, oh, they got Nestor Cortez. It's a good return.
Yeah.
He seemed very much like a Brewers type of pitcher. I know they don't have control of him for very long, but then they add another. I'm not going to say underwhelming prospect, but prospect where you're probably going to get a better return than you anticipated. Right? We saw
Mm-hmm.
that like with Ortiz. Um, I do think that had Williams been healthy, they would have tried to cash in on him at the deadline.
Yeah. Yep.
And
That
so
makes sense.
it felt to me like it was kind of inevitable. I do think that his value may have been dented a little bit with the collapse late in the year. Um, but they were still gonna cash in the chips that they could, and getting Cortez and being able to stick him in the rotation, I think they're probably going to be just fine. They'll find someone else. Uh, is it going to be a young flame throwing former junior college guy that becomes your closer? Uh, they'll find someone to close for them, and they'll proceed without missing a beat. Same way they did when they traded Josh Hader. Like,
Yep.
oh, look at this, we have this guy throwing for his bees. Good luck. Um, but yeah, I mean, when you can get return on your investment, that's always a good thing.
No doubt. Last offseason storyline is Twins related news, Jeremy. And this came, I text you about this one. Uh, Such was my excitement and also lack of knowledge about who these folks are. So you can give us a little overview here. News broke in the middle of the week that the Ishbia brothers are an interested buyer or interested potential buyer of the Minnesota Twins. Sounds like they are a little ways, very early, but a little ways into exploring what purchasing the team might look like and mean. And you're a basketball guy, right? And so at least one of those brothers, and I think both hold at least partial ownership in the Phoenix Suns.
Right.
So anything you've heard about the Ishbia brothers and whether you consider this good news outside of the fact that, I think from any Twins fans perspective, hearing that there are interested buyers feels like good news because people are sick of the Pohlads and want a different direction.
Whenever I think whenever and not whenever, but a lot of the times when you hear about potential buyers and it's someone that you've heard of, that's good news.
Hmm.
Um, when you then hear stories of what they've done as owners of um, other teams, that can make it better or worse. So when they bought the Phoenix Suns, it was days later they turn around and they make a huge splash and trade for Kevin Durant, top 10, arguably better player in the NBA. So it's not going to be a guys that are like, oh, yep, we're going to buy, and now we're going to strip down and lower payroll. They're going to buy a baseball franchise and then be like, who else can we spend money on?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not, I'm just, the hypothetical here is if they own the team and they needed a pitcher and Corbin Burns is a free agent, like that's now a possibility, right?
I can't
Uh,
wrap my head around that.
if, well, they have like, I think 5 times the wealth. Did I read that correctly? As um, the Pohlads, like they would be the second richest owners in baseball behind Steve Cohen.
That's wild.
So what did Steve Cohen just do?
Sign Juan Soto for $765 million.
So, and why did Steve Cohen give him 765 million? Because he was like, I want Juan Soto on my team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're talking about. Now, will they act as irresponsibly as Steve Cohen, where it's just like right? I doubt it. Um, but if that's what they want to do, they certainly have the means to do it. And I, I'm just I don't want to get too optimistic that this is going to happen because I think a lot of things could happen. But they're the brother that I think it's Matt that bought the Suns, and this would be Justin, the brother.
Mm-hmm.
Huge baseball fan. I think I read he went to like 41 straight Tigers opening day games. Like, he's a baseball junkie. And so when he buys this team, if he buys this team, this isn't like a business investment. This is like a business investment that he
It's a
wants to win
passion project too.
championships with. Yeah. So I'm really curious to see, like, is it possible? I think it's possible. If he wants it, he's not going to be outbid for it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, we've seen what happens with Timberwolves, where you deal with shady old businessmen That's how they get rich, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden things change. I do think that the difference is that the Pohlads just don't want to own the Twins, right?
Yep.
Um, and I think Glenn Taylor does want to own the Timberwolves because they're better now. But I think that if there's a means to want to buy, that this could happen relatively quickly in terms of how quick franchises typically sell.
We will keep that very intriguing possibility as part of the dialogue as we move through the off season here. But let's move forward, Jeremy, and talk about some Rule 5 selections because all three of the teams that we talk about the most made a selection, and one of these teams lost a player too. So I actually want to start there. We'll just roll through in alphabetical order. We'll start with the Brewers. It became very much public knowledge prior to the Rule 5 draft that they were going to lose Shane Smith as the first overall selection to the White Sox. And I got a question for you about Shane Smith, right? So let's, just for folks who might be less familiar with the Brewers system, he spent a good chunk of last season at Double-A. It's a fastball up to 98 miles an hour. He's a three-pitch guy. Pitched 87.1 innings, 3.02 ERA, 288 FIP, 106 Ks, and 26 walks. The Brewers had 3 open roster spots on their 40-man going into the Rule 5 draft, and I think it's at least a fair question to ask, does this count as an unforced error? Because you have space, you have a guy that is at least approximately the level where he can contribute to a major league team. He has stuff, and he has a track record of success. So do you think this is an unforced error from the Brewers leaving him unprotected? Or, like we usually say, do we just trust the Brewers to know their business?
Well, I don't know that unforced error is the term that I would use. But whenever a guy goes first in the draft, and there was a handful of years ago, I want to say it was the Pirates. They had guys like go first and second or first and second and third, where it's like, I just don't know that you read the room correctly.
Mm.
Where if you have a guy, and granted, the White Sox just had the first pick, right? Maybe if the White Sox don't take Shane Smith or don't have the first pick, that someone else goes first and Smith goes ninth. Maybe the White Sox just really liked him. But at the same time, there's a benefit to having a guy in your 40-man that's not tied to the Rule 5 rules. So I feel like you make that call to the White Sox, and you're like, hey, you got the first pick.
Right.
Here's what we're planning. What do you think? And if they say, oh, yeah, we love Shane Smith, and maybe that's not a conversation that you have. I don't know. But it's like, well, we'll deal him to you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll trade him to you. So you don't have to keep him up on your, on your big league team.
Mm-hmm.
Throw a prospect that we like that you don't love, where you work that out. Because I feel like those negotiations have to happen. Like
100%.
These 40-man roster spots are super valuable. And so I just, that's the part of me. Now, someone's always going to go first. So maybe that happened with other teams. And maybe Shane Smith was the 8th guy that the White Sox were looking at when, they're looking at the roster. I got to believe you look at this stuff, right? Hey, who are some guys that we're hoping don't get added that we would consider? And maybe all those other guys got taken and was just on that list. But I'm not going to call it an error, but I do think that there is just without knowing what happened behind the scenes, it would behoove both teams if you're going to lose a guy to not lose him in the draft.
Yep.
And I don't know, like that came out that day. It wasn't necessarily a thing where it's like, oh my God, he's the highest rated prospect to ever be drafted in the Rule 5 draft. And so there's this the balance. And, at the end of the day, the Brewers maybe thought this guy doesn't really fit in our plans. We're not going to worry about it. And that's when he gets drafted.
We can revisit the conversation in the middle of next summer and see how he's doing on the south side. The Brewers did select a player from the Cardinals. They selected a left-handed pitcher, Connor Thomas. Kind of a soft tossing lefty, 5'11 fastball, averages around 90 miles an hour, relies on a slider, cutter, sinker. So,
How's the spin rate?
well, don't have the data anymore because True Media and MLB are having a situation.
What would you
So
assume the spin rate is?
I would
Pretty good.
assume I would assume he knows how to spin the ball.
Yeah.
Um, and assume the Brewers pitching lab is going to go to work on him. Seems kind of like a replacement for Hobie Milner in the Brewers pen. I kind of have my doubts whether he's going to stick. Do you have anything to add on Thomas Jeremy? I felt like that's a much lower wattage add than Shane Smith was as a loss.
No, and I do think, I mean, we talk about how, when guys can stick, what makes them most likely to stick. You can hide a lefty in your bullpen, right?
Sure.
And so that's a demographic that we see happen in the Rule 5 draft. But on a whole, are the guy is he likely to stick? The answer is always no.
Yep.
So yeah, to me, that doesn't really move the needle.
Okay, so let's talk about the Cubs pick. The Cubs pick is interesting right off the jump because it's not a pitcher. And we spent a good amount of time in advance of the Rule 5 draft talking about how we expect pitchers are largely going to be the demographic that's taken. So the Cubs turn around and select a utility infielder. Gage Workman, who is the Tigers' fourth round pick from the 2020 draft. Very unusual profile. So he's a 6'4" infielder who's primarily played shortstop as a pro, mostly played third base in college, good athleticism, some raw power, used to be a switch hitter, now only hits left-handed. Really struggled with the hit tool throughout his minor league career to date. Did seem to have a little bit of an uptick and popped a little bit halfway through last season. So after July 1st, he hit 317, 398, 550. So solid triple slash there. Really pretty high K rate, 27.5% strikeout percentage, but a really good defender. I find this one a little bit puzzling, Jeremy, because the tools just don't add up to much more than like a defensive replacement type bench bat. And so honestly, still struggling to make heads or tails of the Gage Workman pick for the Cubs, who seem to be in, I guess they do seem to be in aggressively upgrading their run prevention and upgrading around the margin. So I suppose you could sell it that way. But what did you make of the Workman pick? And did this one make sense to you?
So where do you think he fits defensively? You said defensive replacement. Who's he replacing? Like,
right.
How are you going to justify using a spot in your roster for this guy?
I feel like he's the day off provider in the infield at all infield positions. So he can play. So the scouting report, right, is above average to plus defender, depending on where you have him in the infield. So he can spot your second baseman, your shortstop, your third baseman. Maybe he plays a game or two per week, spelling folks who need a day off. But I really can't because I don't trust the upturn in the hit tool. Admittedly, he had a solid stretch at the end of last season, but the bat to ball skills, I just don't know if they're good enough for him to last at the major league level.
Right. I think you take a look at him in spring training and see. And then I think the reality is, or the most likely reality is that he doesn't fit. And if they like him enough, he clears waivers, you offer him back, you work out a trade, you stick him in your minors, right? You're not taking a guy you don't like, but that skill set doesn't fit. Like, it just doesn't. You're not going to use him as a pinch runner, right? You're not going to use him as the He's not just a guy that you stick into the shortstop in the eighth inning, and because he's a defensive wizard. Um, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. But it's if you like a guy enough, you give him a shot,
Yep.
and that's what the Cubs will do. So yeah, to be determined on this one. If I had to bet, I would say he'll be back with the Tigers if the Tigers liked him.
Which is going to be the case with a lot of these picks, right? And so my only hypothesis with Workman is the Cubs either think he unlocks something offensively in the second half of the season or feel like they can help him continue to unlock something further when they get a hold of him. Let's move on, Jeremy, and talk about the Twins. They did not lose any players in the Rule 5 draft. We'll come to that in a moment, or at least in the major league portion. They made a selection for the first time since 2017. 7 years it's been since their last selection in the Rule 5 draft. They took Iverson Castellano, a right-handed pitcher from the Phillies organization, who was actually their reigning minor league pitcher of the year. 40.3 innings at Double-A last year, pitched to a 3.79 ERA, whip under 1, 11.2 strikeouts per 9. Fastball, curveball, changeup is the pitch mix. It sounds like the plan is they're going to start him out in a legitimate multi-inning relief role, which I feel like is something with the Twins that has been much speculated upon, but never really kind of implemented or actualized. Does sound like they think he has potential as a starting pitcher down the road. What do you make of the Castellano pick? It sounds like he was heavily fancied to be picked by someone, if not the Twins, and another org in the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, he makes sense, right? Guys that you can put in the bullpen, and the way that the Twins have used their bullpen, where it's been a shuttle, and so he has to stay active for X amount of days this year, and so the shuttle that he'll be on is going to be one where he'll throw in a blowout 3 innings, and then 4 days later he'll throw in another blowout 3 innings, and then the Twins will be short, and they'll be like, "Hey, how's your knee?" He'll say, "Feels okay," and they're like, "Yeah, you sure you don't have tendonitis?" He'll be like, "I don't think I had tendonitis," and they'll send him to the doc, and the doc will be like, "No, there's tendonitis in your knee or your shoulder." And then he'll ride the shuttle on the injured list for 10, 15 days, whatever he has to do. Then he'll come back, and he'll spend his 90 days or whatever it is active. And then next year, he'll compete for a spot in the bullpen. And so the whole thing with the Twins bullpen is full. Look at the Twins bullpens to start the season over the last handful of years.
Yeah.
You got 4 guys on the injured list, or you got it doesn't matter. Like, it's not full because one guy's going to have these issues. One guy's going to come in and can't get ramped up. One guy's going to have a setback in spring training. Like, your bullpen of 8 is really going to be a bullpen of 10, and 8 guys are going to be active. And by the time that the guy that you really want in your 8, who isn't active, is ready to be activated, somebody else is going to have a blister or a shoulder impingement. Like, these are all things that happen very regularly. So you throw him into the mix. He's well thought of, and is he going to be Ryan Presley, or is he going to be that Doyle character that they drafted? Like, we don't know, but it's worth the shot because the Twins have a number of pitchers that are relatively close, and he can just be part of that mix. And if he's better than advertised, great. And if he's worse, they can still, if they like what he's got, they can still weasel him through, keep him active, and then play the normal game next year.
Pause real quick. I just want to say that, like, calling someone that Doyle character is maybe one of my favorite things you've said on this show.
I don't know. I don't remember his first name.
I'm into it. Okay. Only other question. Well, 2 more questions quick about the Twins. Any concern that they have like 0 lefties in their pen with the exception of Cody Funderburk heading into 2025. I guess what I'm really asking, Jeremy, is do you think they're going to try and target adding another lefty at some point here?
I would think they would look at it.
Mhm.
I do think the value of having a lefty changed when the pitching rules changed
Yeah.
because you're not throwing a lefty to face a lefty. Like
hmm
you're going to throw a lefty in, and then the team's going to bring a right-handed guy off the bench. You'd be like, ah, shoot, this is a problem. If you can get a quality lefty, great. Like Aroldis Chapman is a quality left-handed arm, not a quality left-handed person, and so that's why you don't do something like that. But I don't know that it would be weird to not have one, but I don't know that it's the end of the world. And like I
Yeah.
said, there's always room to add another guy. So no, not any concern right now with the fact that they don't have a lefty. Besides,
Fair enough. And then finally, surprised at all that they did not lose anybody in the draft?
no, like the whole like concern about Rosario getting drafted was insane.
Yeah.
He wouldn't stick, so he wasn't going anywhere. So no, that didn't even didn't even get on the radar for being like if they would have had someone get drafted, I'd have been very surprised.
Yep.
Not getting someone drafted, I was like, yep, that's exactly what I expected to see.
And if they did, it would have been a pitcher. Okay, let's finish up with a couple of questions here, Jeremy. So I actually want to start with the second one. So Cody Christie, friend from Twins Daily, asks, where would you rank Iverson Castellanos on your Twins top prospect list? I actually came prepared today. So what we're going to do is we're going to share Baseball Prospectus's most recent Twins list, which came out a mere few days ago and happens to be quite aligned with my own. And we're going to do a thought exercise where we try and figure out where Castellanos slots in.
When you said share, like, are you like putting it on the screen?
Yeah, I'm like literally about to put it on the screen right now.
I was like, what? How are we doing this?
All right. Can you see that?
I mean, I can see. I can see that it's there. You might want to add it to the screen.
Okay, I'm gonna walk you through who they got here. Okay, so
I can see exactly what you can see, and that's no names.
Wait, so what do you mean you can't see names?
I can't see the names on that. It's just a little thing. You got to like add.
Okay, well, I'll read.
Are you gonna add it to like the screen, or are you just gonna leave it down there?
Here we go.
That's what I'm talking
about. There we go. Old man fails at technology. Okay, so we're screen sharing this now, right? So obviously we're not looking in the top 10, but it's just sidebar. This is relatively aligned with my top 10. I think it's interesting. So we're going to scroll down here past all the Twins top end guys.
Yeah, Morris,
Kalen Culpepper.
Didn't look at all like Culpepper.
Connor Prelip at number 7. Very nice. P.S. If you don't subscribe to Baseball Prospectus, I cannot recommend it enough. They got Charlie Soto at 8. Kyle DeBarge.
Love it.
Corey Lewis. All right, now we're outside the top 10. So the gut check, Jeremy, is Castellanos better than this guy? CJ Culpepper?
No.
Eduardo Beltre?
No.
Yasser Mercedes?
No.
Gabriel Gonzalez?
Depending how you feel about Gabriel Gonzalez, very possibly yes.
Okay, so the max
he's in this right. He's in this range.
The max is 14. Okay, Billy Amick.
Depending on how you feel about Billy Amick, possibly.
Rain Doncone, who I think is too low on their list, but that's another conversation.
You think he's too low?
I do.
Yeah, I would say in this range. Before after him, fine. Winokur should probably be higher.
Jason Hill
definitely be higher. Above Rosario.
But I wouldn't have him above Olivar. So I would say 19-ish is where I'm going.
Yeah, and I would probably fair? I would be a little bit higher. I would have Hill higher. I would have Winokur higher. But yeah, those other like Amick and Gonzalez. Yeah, so the 16 to 18 range I think is very, very fair. That's what you're looking for. I mean, you're trading an expiring veteran for a player like that.
Yeah. But here's the nice thing, right? So the two nice things are, one, you're getting that guy for free, and you think you've identified a role where he can contribute. And then two, if, as the Twins have shown success in doing, you can be a finishing school for a pitcher.
Mhm.
And the example I'll give is Joe Ryan, right? Joe Ryan did not come to the Minnesota Twins as a fully formed starting pitcher. And not for a second am I suggesting that Iverson Cassiano was going to be as good as Joe Ryan. But the Twins took his development and took it to the next level. And now look at him. If you can apply a little bit more polish to Castellano, then there's a potential that he could jump up that list a couple more spots.
Pretty much so.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Man, you might want to read this one, Jeremy, the one from Max, because I got a strong opinion on it, and maybe I can do a quick overview here, then we can
Yes,
get your
I love
take.
that. I'll ask the question. You get to answer this one. My answer will be different than yours.
Ooh.
Do the Twins have viable MLB options at catcher for when Ryan Jeffers departs?
No. And
Okay.
I don't think it really matters, is my caveat.
Okay.
So I want to take this opportunity, and we can dig in on this a little bit more, right? But before we get to you disagreeing with me, I do think it's worth walking through a little bit. What is the Twins catcher depth in the upper levels of their minor leagues? Because there's a bunch of guys that no one really talks about. So you've got Camargo at AAA, who was up off and on in major leagues last year, barely caught, if at all.
Okay.
And so my wondering is, do the Twins trust him defensively? I don't think we can't say that they don't, but they were very hesitant to throw him in defensively. Then you've got Ricardo Olivar at AA. He is not a catcher. They're going to continue to play him a catcher. I don't think like the reviews on the defense are bad. There's three more guys at AA we should mention. So Noah Cardenas, he's 25 years old at AA, 587 OPS in 2024. Andrew Cassetti, who, like the scouting report, would be a bat first catcher, 643 OPS at AA in 2024. And then Alex Isola, a 633 OPS at AA in 2024, and he's 26 years old. At AAA, you have a couple of guys who are a little bit more intriguing. Jefferson Morales, but up at 820 OPS. He's also a little bit older, 25, 820 OPS in 2024. And then Jefferson Valadares, he put up a 727 OPS at 22 in 2024. And so all of this to say, I don't think there's a clear favorite. There's not a clear, like, this guy is in the race. What there is, in my opinion, is there's a bunch of guys, one of whom is going to be a solid backup major league catcher. Like a defense first type of guy where the bat isn't impactful, but most major league catchers' bats aren't impactful. And we don't know who that is yet. We'll figure that out. And it'll likely be more clear after this season, but I don't think there's a clear favorite. How does that align or not with your thoughts?
So my answer was going to be yes. And then you were going to say, well, who? And I was going to say, don't know, because somebody will figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ryan Jeffers wasn't the let's even go back further. Mitch Garver wasn't the answer.
Yep.
And then Ryan Jeffers wasn't the answer. And yet that's what happened. So maybe the guys on your list that you just read, maybe the guys not on your list.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that they will have a viable option when Ryan Jeffers departs. Maybe he's not on the roster. Maybe they make a deal. Maybe they get somebody in there. the guy that you mentioned last was a minor league phase Rule 5 guy,
Yeah.
who's listed on the Saints roster at age 22, who has played all of 15 games above rookie ball. Like he's not going to be a AAA.
Right.
He's going to be in Fort Myers, and he was okay at 22. So, I think we've seen like Cassetti's had really good stretches. Is he a catcher? Maybe not.
Maybe.
Camargo's had really good stretches in St. Paul. Is he a catcher? Probably not. Morales seems like he's been around forever. Is he the answer? Who knows? Probably not. But I do think that that's one position that you don't have to invest a whole lot into, because even when you find that guy, and the Twins have had really good catchers, it doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
And so if you can find someone that can help support your pitching staff and not be just an absolute automatic out, you're going to be just fine. And Jeffers was this way last year, right? He came out guns blazing and then was not real good. And if you got it, you go out into free agency and you overspend on a guy and stopgap and bridge but I think that the important part is that you have at least like 4A depth, all the time, and the Twins have it.
So I have two very quick counterpoints to all of yours, which are well made, right? And my first one is the Twins have shown a preference to lean into an almost exactly 50-50 catcher split, right? Over the last couple of years between Vasquez and Jeffers. Now, the value of that has been borne out by they are the only MLB organization to only use two catchers pretty much for 2 entire seasons. So they're onto something, right, in terms of keeping their catchers healthy. So my only counterpoint to your point is you need someone who's a little bit better than a guy who you're going to play for 40, 50 games a season, because you want a guy who's going to be able to split and do 80-ish games a season. And that's what I think they don't have yet, if they intend to continue that 50-50 split, which they've shown a preference for. And then my other thing, just kind of building on that and anticipating when we get into it in the new year, 2025 draft, fairly emergingly solid catching crop. So,
and I've seen a mock to take catchers.
Everyone mocks the catchers to the Twins. That's like an automatic thing.
So the other thing, though, is when you talk about how most organizations do it, you're looking for a catcher to catch 120 games. You have to have a dude if he's going to catch 120 to 130 games. I was in the minority. When Drew Butera was the backup, I didn't mind when he played.
Yeah.
He was not great offensively. In fact, he was bad. But if he would have played 80 games, like I felt really good about what was happening behind the plate in 80 games. And the offense was good enough around him, and you move guys around and you keep guys fresh. That it'll be interesting because Vasquez's deal's up this year, right?
Yes, the last season, I think.
And so they'll do their split again. Jeffers has got, I want to say, at least 3 years till free agency. And, the Twins obviously dealt Garver at the time where he was going to start catching less. He had some injury things. But yeah, I mean, what Vasquez cost? $30 million for 3 years?
Yep.
That's not much. I mean, that's not even you're not even getting a number 4 starter for $10 million.
That's much. It's a lot now.
Well, for the Twins, but not when they have
the
a
Twins
new owner.
Currently, 100%.
Not when the Twins have a new owner. They'll be like $30 million for a catcher, man. We can do that every year. So yeah, I mean, I do think that they have someone. I just think he hasn't emerged yet to be obvious. They do like to. The Twins have had a propensity in the past to take like failing infielders and move them to catcher. And so I don't think it's beyond the realm of a possibility that maybe a catcher that they have in their system is not catching currently and could be moved from another spot to that, and maybe not, but I mean, you have a shortstop with a really good arm like Kenley Jansen, right?
Mhm.
So he didn't catch, like he wasn't a catcher, and then you convert him to a catcher. So um, I think that that's something that you can kind of figure out as you go. I'm not at all concerned that there's not a number one name waiting in the wings, because you look at teams like, look at the Giants, like Buster Posey retires. Who's going to be their catcher? Joey Bart, right? How'd that go?
Fair.
Poorly, right? Matt Wieters was going to be the answer for the Orioles. He was okay for a few years, right? They locked into Adley Rutschman, and he's been their guy. But you can look all over. Who was the catcher for? Um, I want to say it was the Padres organization a handful of years ago. No, the Indians, like that Fernando Mejia.
Oh, sure.
Like he was the answer, um, and he fizzled out. And so it's just such a crapshoot. That position more than anything is just a huge crapshoot. So if you're fretting about that, just don't. Like
Fair
there's
enough.
way more
Heard it
things.
here first. Do not stress about the catcher position. All right, dude. We're gonna get out of here. So quickly some housekeeping before we call it a day. It is holiday season, so we will not be recording an episode next week. We are hoping to come back with an episode the week of 12/30. We're gonna try and sneak an episode in between Christmas and New Year's. We'll keep doing off-season stuff, keep up to date on all that, cover any news for the teams that we are covering the most, which seems like it's going to involve at least one big Cubs trade. Um, Ways that you can support the show: you can find us on Twitter X at DTS_pod1, on Blue Sky at Destination the Show. All of our stuff is usually up on YouTube. The handle there is at Destination the Show. And then we love hearing questions, comments, and discussion points from folks. So you can also send those via email. That's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and look forward to catching you guys in about 10
Hold
days or
on,
so.
we got to talk about something before we sign off. Your daughter competed in the big gymnastics meet.
Oh, she did. That she did. She
And?
did. And she did wonderfully. She competed in the state gymnastics championships on Friday last week at the Minnesota State Fair, and she did really wonderfully. And she was very proud of herself. She finished second in uneven bars, and she was jazzed.
So here's what I was thinking about this, because if you finish first at 8 years old, like, how do you stay motivated for that when you're 8?
Well, it's split, so they're divided up by age category.
Right, but I mean, you finish second, and it's like, now I know, like I'm close, but I'm not there. Like there's got to be some motivation, right?
Yeah.
And you'll walk into her bedroom, and like to the door, and you'll just say that girl's name.
You know the actual funny thing about that, dude, is so there's like 25 kids in her division, and she went like second on bars and put up a really big score. So like at the level she's at, good scores are like 9.2, 9.3 out of 10. She put up like a 9.5 something on bars, and she held first the entire way until the last kid to go, who put up a 9.6 at the very last person, which was funny. But
Could you say, like, when that score went up on the screen, can you repeat your exact words at that time?
So I didn't catch the reaction to that live because it's a massive setup at like the state competition or whatever. So they have 4 of every piece of equipment, right? So like 4 floors, like 8 beams, 4 uneven bars, just like a massive thing. And there's only one relatively small scoreboard. But I just kind of assumed when she got down to like the being having the lead with the 1 kids ago. I was like, well, it's in the bag. Was not in the bag. So you you live and you learn. But she
That's
did
funny.
great. Very, very
That's
proud of her.
cool stuff. Yeah, that's way cool.
All right, you guys. Enjoy the holidays. We'll be back with y'all in a couple of weeks here. Take it easy. Enjoy the baseball. Enjoy the off season. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show in 2024. We'll see you guys soon.